Cassie's childhood was a whirlwind of privilege and excess, a life of luxury that most could only dream of. Born into a family of immense wealth, she wanted for nothing, her every desire catered to with a mere snap of her father's fingers. From an early age, she was showered with lavish gifts and extravagant vacations, her parents sparing no expense to ensure their only child had the best of everything. Cassie's fondest memories were of lazy summer days spent lounging by the family's sprawling pool, sipping on fruity concoctions as her mother basked in the sun, her father's booming laughter echoing across the manicured grounds. Despite their affluence, Cassie's parents doted on her, showering her with affection and attention. Her father, a self-made business tycoon, would regale her with tales of his rise to success, instilling in her a sense of ambition and drive. Her mother, a former socialite, taught her the art of charm and manipulation, lessons that would serve Cassie well in the years to come. As she grew older, Cassie's academic performance left much to be desired. She struggled to keep up with her peers, her mind often wandering during lectures, distracted by the allure of the lavish lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. It was during her college years that Cassie truly embraced the power of manipulation, using her charm and cunning to sway professors and classmates alike. One particular incident stood out, a pivotal moment that solidified Cassie's belief in her ability to bend others to her will. It was the night before her final exam, and Cassie found herself woefully unprepared. With a coy smile and a well-timed flutter of her lashes, she managed to convince her professor to grant her an extension, buying herself precious time to cram for the test. As she walked away, a sense of triumph washed over her, the realization that she could manipulate even the most respected authority figures with ease. From that moment on, Cassie relied on her charm and guile to navigate the academic world, using her physical attributes and cunning to secure passing grades and ultimately her degree. Upon graduation, Cassie found herself adrift, her parents' wealth and connections unable to secure her the high-powered career she had envisioned. Cassie's desperation for a lucrative career had reached a fever pitch after a string of failed job interviews and rejections. Her once charmed life of privilege was slipping through her fingers, and she found herself grasping at any opportunity that promised to restore her lavish lifestyle. It was during one of her late-night internet binges that she stumbled upon a cryptic job posting, buried deep within the recesses of the dark web. The listing was vague, offering little more than a tantalizing promise of wealth and excitement for those with a particular set of skills. Intrigued, Cassie followed the breadcrumb trail of coded messages and encrypted communications, her curiosity piqued by the air of mystery surrounding the opportunity. When the truth finally dawned on her that she was being recruited as a hired assassin, Cassie's initial reaction was one of shock and revulsion. The idea of taking a life for money was abhorrent, a line she had never imagined crossing. But as the weight of her financial woes pressed down upon her, that initial disgust slowly gave way to a twisted sense of rationalization. She had always been a master manipulator, able to bend others to her will with a charming smile and a well-crafted lie. This, she reasoned, was simply an extension of that skill, a more permanent solution to her problems. And the promise of wealth, the allure of a life of luxury once more, was too tempting to resist. The customer's request, when it finally came, was chilling in its simplicity: to eliminate her spouse, a wealthy businessman, in order to collect on a lucrative life insurance policy. Cassie's heart raced as she read the details, her mind already calculating the potential payout. It was a staggering sum, more than enough to secure her future and restore the opulent lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. With a deep breath, she accepted the contract, pushing aside any lingering doubts or moral qualms. This was business, she told herself, a transaction like any other. The fact that she would never know the identity of her target made it easier to detach, to view the act as nothing more than a means to an end. As she prepared for her first hit, Cassie felt a twisted sense of excitement coursing through her veins. This was what she had been born for, a chance to embrace the darker aspects of her nature and revel in the thrill of the hunt. She was a predator, and her target was just another faceless victim, a stepping stone on her path to wealth and power. Cassie's heart pounded in her chest as she crept through the dimly lit hallway, her footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. The weight of the silenced pistol in her hand was a familiar comfort, a tool she had grown accustomed to wielding with lethal precision. This was just another job, she told herself, a means to an end, a way to secure the lavish lifestyle she craved. As she approached the study, the door slightly ajar, a sliver of warm light spilling into the corridor, a sense of unease began to creep over her. Something felt off, a nagging feeling that she couldn't quite shake. Pushing aside her doubts, she peered through the gap, her breath catching in her throat as she laid eyes on her target. There, hunched over his desk, engrossed in paperwork as always, was her father. The man who had given her everything, who had showered her with love and affection from the moment she was born. Cassie's world came crashing down around her, the realization hitting her like a ton of bricks. Her mother, the woman she had trusted implicitly, had betrayed them both in the most heinous way imaginable. The customer's request, the contract she had so eagerly accepted, was nothing more than a twisted plot to eliminate her father and claim his fortune. Cassie's hands trembled, the pistol suddenly feeling like a lead weight in her grasp. How could her mother do this? How could she so callously discard the man who had provided for them, who had given them a life of luxury and privilege? As her father looked up, his brow furrowed in confusion, Cassy felt her resolve wavering. "Cassy, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. In that moment, Cassy's world fractured, the lines between right and wrong blurring into a haze of moral ambiguity. She had crossed a line, embraced a darkness that threatened to consume her very soul. And now, she was faced with a choice that would forever alter the course of her life. With a trembling hand, she raised the pistol, her aim steady despite the turmoil raging within her. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's just business." The muffled report of the silenced weapon echoed through the room, and her father slumped forward, a crimson stain blooming across his crisp white shirt. Cassy watched, her heart shattering into a million pieces as the life drained from his eyes, the man who had loved her unconditionally reduced to a lifeless husk. As she turned to leave, her mother's triumphant smile greeted her in the doorway, a twisted expression of greed and depravity etched across her features. "Well done, my dear," she purred, her eyes glinting with malice. "Now we can finally have everything we've ever wanted." In that moment, something snapped within Cassy. The weight of her actions, the realization that she had taken the life of the man who had given her everything, crashed down upon her like a tidal wave. She felt sick, disgusted with herself and the monster she had become, a pawn in her mother's twisted game of greed and betrayal. Without a word, Cassy raised the pistol once more, her hand steady despite the turmoil raging within her. Her mother's eyes widened in shock and fear, but before she could utter a sound, Cassy pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, louder and more final than the first, echoing through the cavernous house like a death knell. Her mother crumpled to the floor, her eyes frozen in a glassy stare of disbelief, the life seeping from her body in a crimson pool. Cassy stood there, the pistol still smoking in her hand, her chest heaving with each ragged breath. She had crossed a line, a point of no return, and there was no going back. The weight of her actions pressed down upon her, suffocating her with a sense of guilt and remorse that threatened to consume her very soul. As she looked upon the lifeless bodies of her parents, the people who had given her everything, she felt a profound emptiness, a void that no amount of wealth or power could ever fill. In that moment, she realized the true cost of her actions, a price far greater than any material possession could ever be worth. Her mother's betrayal had been the catalyst, the spark that ignited the flames of darkness within Cassy's heart. The woman who had once showered her with love and affection had revealed herself to be a monster, driven by greed and a twisted desire for power. As Cassy stood over her mother's lifeless form, she felt a strange sense of detachment, as if a part of her had been severed, leaving behind a hollow shell. The bond that had once tied them together had been shattered, replaced by a cold, bitter resentment that burned like acid in her veins. With a trembling hand, she reached down and closed her mother's eyes, a final act of respect for the woman she had once loved. But as she did so, she felt no sorrow, no remorse, only a grim determination to leave this chapter of her life behind, no matter the cost. Turning away from the gruesome scene, Cassy made her way out of the house, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls like the tolling of a funeral bell. She knew that there was no turning back, no way to undo the atrocities she had committed. As she stepped out into the cool night air, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for the uncertain future that lay ahead. The path before her was shrouded in darkness, but she knew that she would walk it alone, unburdened by the weight of her past, forging a new identity from the ashes of her former life. With a final, haunting glance back at the house that had once been her home, Cassy turned and disappeared into the night, leaving behind a trail of blood and broken dreams, a reminder of the darkness that had taken root within her soul, a darkness that would forever stain the foundations of the life she had once known.